Video games as a hobby have exploded in popularity in the last decade, with the industry as a whole worth approximately $90.1 billion. That's about 3 times what the industry was worth at approximately $31.23 billion in 2012. Needless to say, in this day and age, everyone is a gamer. While we may just write off playing video games as a fun hobby or escape from our daily routine, gaming might be worth more than given credit for. Just like any other pastime, gaming has had a swath of not only indirect benefits, but possible therapeutic application as well. But more on that later. Very quickly, I would like to thank one of my viewers for the topic of today's video. After producing the Violence in Video Games video, this should be a breath of fresh air. So thanks again, Infinite Rats, for the suggestion. Let's talk about general benefits that come from playing video games. From a critical perspective, video games can provide a handful of cognitive benefit. Research has shown that playing video games can increase response times, encourage teamwork, critical thinking, visual memory, and the ability to multitask. These benefits make sense, since video games often demand our full attention and cognitive focus to play and require a lot of time investment to become good at a game. Another benefit that I believe is not talked about enough is the social aspect that comes with gaming. Personally, a lot of my good friends I now spend time with have been met while playing games. Communities can also form around games and continue to bring people together in ways never thought possible. My favorite example of this phenomenon has to be speed running. I will probably never complete a speed run in my life, but I love watching breakdown videos of how a group of gamers figured out the most optimal way to speed run a game. Recently, I watched a fantastic video documenting the process of speed running The Hobbit. If you haven't watched the video, I'd highly recommend it. M. Karma's telling of the process of finding skips, movement tech, and tricks is phenomenal, and it is one of the most properly done historical documentations of developing a speedrun. It's amazing how people can come together through speed running and solve a complex puzzle and see their hard work pay off. In my opinion, speedrunning communities are one of the greatest examples of breaking down social barriers and coming together for the love of video games. But speedrunners are not the only group of gamers. Many multiplayer games have player-supported communities from Reddit to Discord that bring everybody together. It's this idea of a community that elevates people from just playing a game together to something greater than that. Let's shift gears and explore some interesting new developments regarding video games in a medical sense.
Hi, everybody!
Hi, Dr. Nick!
In the last few decades, there seems to be an uptick in research into games as part of a prescription to therapy or physical recovery. This makes sense, since the impact of video games from a neurological standpoint is still being explored and debated. One fascinating example from 2009 alludes to playing Tetris as a method to prevent flashbacks after experiencing trauma. First, let's discuss what is trauma. Psychologically speaking, trauma is defined as a stressful event that requires actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. A traumatic event can range from a brutal car accident, being held at gunpoint, or experiencing a natural disaster firsthand. After experiencing trauma, an individual can suffer from PTSD and have an extremely negative association with the memory of their own trauma. But how does the trauma actually affect someone? Well, to oversimplify, trauma affects 2 parts of the brain directly, the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala is responsible for emotions, emotional behavior, and processing fearful and threatening stimuli. Whenever you find yourself in a situation where you have the classic flight or fight response, you can thank the amygdala. While the amygdala is responsible for a survival response, the hippocampus codes learning and memory. Neuroscientists believe that the hippocampus will take sensory stimuli like tastes, touch, smells, and sights, and then code that stimuli into a memory. The memory is then stored by the hippocampus for the long term. If a specific memory is vivid and you can remember almost every detail, then it is thanks to the hippocampus. You can see where this is going. Trauma basically overloads stimulation in both of these specific regions of the brain. Let's go step by step. Let's say I get into a brutal car accident where I break 2 ribs, my arm, and the other driver is rendered unconscious after the crash. A horrific experience, if any. Both the other driver and I are picked up by emergency services and rushed to the hospital. During this whole time, I'm conscious, in pain, and trying to make sense of what just happened. During and after the car accident, the amygdala is experiencing a swath of stimuli from the initial impact and pain that I'm experiencing from my broken bones. At this point, the amygdala becomes overstimulated and starts a flight or fight response to try to remedy the whole situation. Of course, it can't, because I'm unable to move under the rubble of two sandwiched cars. Once I'm removed from the crash and taken to the hospital to be treated, the amygdala may begin to calm down. Finally, once I'm resting and recovering, the hippocampus will begin to code the memory of the accident. However, because of the overstimulation of the amygdala during the whole event, the hippocampus may code the memory with incredible vividness. Specifically, I could remember almost every exact detail, and this is where it gets interesting. Because the car crash was a near-death experience, there is a possibility that once the memory is coded, and I experience a sensory input, my amygdala could become overstimulated once again and result in a flashback. Let's say, for the hypothetical, I just had my car washed and it was washed with the new car smell. A year passes since I was in the whole crash, and my friend comes over to show me his brand new car. I open the door and then sit in the driver's seat and begin to smell the exact same new car smell. Almost instantly, because of the smell, I remember the car crash and my amygdala becomes overstimulated and begins to respond even though I'm not in a threatening situation. And in the worst case, I could develop post-traumatic stress disorder because of the traumatic events of the car crash. Another quick but classic example would be veterans of war experiencing flashbacks when fireworks are shot off. This happens because of the auditory stimulation of booming fireworks being associated with gunfire and bombs. PTSD is a serious neurological disorder that can severely impact those who are affected. But what does Tetris have to do with all of this? Well, research theorizes that the brain has selective resources that have a limited capacity. This means that the parts of the brain that have particular functionality can only code sensory input to a limited extent, and everything else is lost. And if you can disrupt the memory coding process, a vivid memory might not completely form in the hippocampus. Well, researchers from the University of Oxford believe that if you're able to direct attention away from trauma, resources could be taken away from forming a memory associated with it, thus reducing the likelihood of flashbacks and the possibility of developing PTSD. So, how do we distract the brain? Simple. Play Tetris. While Tetris seems like an easy game at first, anybody who's played for a long time knows that it can get incredibly complicated very quickly. The Oxford scientists suggest that in order to disrupt the memory forming process, you would need to interact with something called a visuospatial working memory task. That's a mouthful. Simply, a visuospatial working memory task is an activity where you identify where shapes are located between each other. Tetris is a perfect example, in my opinion, of a visual spatial task. Moving the blocks to make stacks and delete rows takes a considerable amount of brain power, believe it or not. This is why the Oxford team thinks that Tetris would be a prime candidate for preventing flashbacks. This was tested by having participants watch a traumatic film and having the non-control group play Tetris. It was found that the participants that played Tetris had less flashbacks than the group that did not. Quick side note, the researchers called this a cognitive vaccine approach, which is a radically wild name, and I love it. Anyway, the rest of the article is fascinating, and I would highly recommend you read it. I'll leave the links down below. Never in my life did I think Tetris would be used as a preventative measure to stop flashbacks, but it's great. And of all games to be chosen for this specific case, Tetris, it kind of seems the most fitting, don't you think? I want to wrap up with a feel-good story about a man, his wife, and some really awesome game devs. Back in 2014 was the year that a game named Destiny was released. While the launch was not well received, a heartwarming story came from the team at Bungie. One of the game's hallmark features are exotic weapons and armor. They're pieces of gear that are both unique and extremely powerful, from rockets that fire tracking clusters to snipers with infinitely regenerating ammo and burst rifles that fire nanites that burrow deep into your skin. Exotics make Destiny feel special, and during the launch of Destiny 1, getting an exotic was like getting the best Christmas present that you didn't even know you wanted.
Go Horn! Go Horn! Go Horn! Ah! I gotta go Horn! I got the...
Now, allow me to introduce you to a Reddit user named BKBunny87. After Destiny's release, she would take to the Destiny Reddit and post this. A lengthy explanation would tell that her husband, Eric, had gone through several brain surgeries that had significantly impacted his memory. After the surgeries, however, Eric's neurologist suggested that he play video games to help with PT and recovery. BK Bunny tells of how much of a positive impact playing Destiny has made on her husband with his own recovery. After posting, she was met by fellow members of the community who all wanted to pitch in and help make Eric's Destiny experience even better. Some would even lend a hand in gathering a raid group so Eric could take on the Vault of Glass, Destiny's first 6-player raid experience. But then, the impossible happened. Then community manager DJ would find BK Bunny's post and reach out, sending Eric a package to his in-game mailbox. Eric was then met with his very own exotic, the Fate of All Fools. Needless to say, Eric and BK Bunny were ecstatic. The Fate of All Fools is a semi-automatic rifle that boasts a unique perk that increases crit damage if you chain body shots. And yes, while the Fate of All Fools is technically a recolor of the Stranger's rifle and was made into the Jade Rabbit, a weapon that everyone could acquire, Eric's gun was unique and one of a kind, both in appearance with its matte blue color and function with its own unique stat line. Bungie saw one of their players who had received so much good from their game and decided to go above and beyond to continue to facilitate Eric's own recovery. It's actions like this that really show that game developers and the companies can care as much about the experience as their own players. So fantastic. Video games have some amazing potential for practical application with medicine, from general benefits to preventing PTSD. I think I'm quite sure that video games will continue to be used as a medium for both fun and medical research. And this might sound cliche, but don't let anyone make fun of you for playing video games, or in fact, make fun of you for whatever you do for fun. Who cares what activities you do to have fun, right? Stay true to yourself, and never let anyone stop you from doing whatever the heck you want. If you've made it this far, then thank you. I really appreciate it. This video was a lot of fun to make, and it was fascinating to learn about all the research. As usual, if you want to read anything, the links will be down below. And if you want to continue to support the channel for more content like this, all you gotta do is like and subscribe. If you have any specific topics that you would like me to explore, please let me know in the comments. And thanks again, and I hope you have a good one.